Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about defunding the police solves criminal rampages, systemic racism perspectives, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Marxist, not American, and finally, if we must be tribal. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. We continued over the weekend to see all sorts of amazing violent protests committed in the cities around America, all supposedly stemming from the violence, one particular action, a Minneapolis police officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd. That supposedly prompted all of the protests we've seen around the country. And part of the response from left-wing governments around this country is growing talk about the idea, should we defund the police departments? Actually, that's a serious question they're asking. Should we, in response to criminal rampages, defund the police department? I'm going to ask Matt the Wonderful to show you a very short clip. This is just a clip someone took in Minneapolis after the rampaging mobs came through downtown Minneapolis and destroyed buildings, burned buildings. Take a look. So that is downtown Minneapolis. I will tell you, if you listen to my show very often, you realize that I've mentioned before, my dad grew up in Minneapolis, in Minnetonka, and I have a wide range of cousins, both sides of my family, all over Minnesota. I was texting with one of them over the weekend, and he said, he lives outside of Minneapolis in a suburb, but he said downtown Minneapolis looks kind of like Libya in the day, referring to the fact it looks like a war zone. So in response to that level of violence, criminal conduct, police largely being held back, not because they don't understand what to do, but because they're following orders to more or less let these people rampage. So I want to tell you the most amazing interview that happened. So in Minneapolis, after what you just saw, that kind of violence, the city council has voted. They have now voted to essentially defund the Minneapolis Police Department. Defund the police department. They're going to switch over to something like kind of a community justice-based idea instead of actually using police. Quick clip Matt the Wonderful has of Ilhan Omar explaining this to a cheering crowd in Minneapolis.
Saying not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
Okay, she's talking about dismantling the police department. That cheering went on and on and on. I spared you listening to it, but on and on and on. So you have Ilhan Omar, Democrat socialist, Muslim activist, member of Congress, urging people in Minneapolis to get behind this idea. Even more amazingly, a member of the city council, in Minneapolis, someone who's elected by the people of Minneapolis, after they voted. And by the way, the Minneapolis mayor first said, no, we can't defund the police department. Mob turned on him, screaming at him. But a member of the Minneapolis Police Department went on CNN with Allison Camerata. So she's basically saying, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. We've defunded the police department. Defunded. We're going to turn to a more community-based justice. So Allison Camerata asked a question which would be on the minds of millions of Americans. Well, what if someone's breaking into my house? So what do I do if I can hear someone breaking into my house at night, stealing things from me? To which this woman answered, the Minneapolis City Council, the president of the Minneapolis City Council named Lisa Bender, said, yes, and I hear that loud and clear from several of my neighbors, and I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege. So now you're exhibiting, apparently, the unspoken word white, exhibiting white privilege if you think, because you pay your taxes, that if your house is being robbed, you ought to be able to call the police and someone will show up. That is in the mindset of now the radical socialist American left that runs Minneapolis. That is now their mindset, explaining why, if you happen to be a taxpayer who owns a home or an apartment in Minneapolis, and you feel you can hear a criminal getting into your apartment, already in your apartment, that you're exhibiting white privilege if you want to complain about it. You're exhibiting privilege if you think that you should be able to call the police for whom you've been paying taxes for years and that they ought to come and protect you and your property. I will tell you, folks, Minneapolis isn't the only one. Chicago also talking about defunding the police. And in Chicago, they had, over this past weekend, they had the most murders in Chicago, 18 murders in 24 hours, the deadliest day in Chicago in 60 years. This is since the riots. So you had the massive, and they're not protests. These are not George Floyd protests. These are Antifa, Black Lives Matter, radical left socialist protests, socialist rioters and looters in Chicago, leading to crime and death and murder in Chicago after a weekend with 18 murders in 24 hours, breaking a record of 60 years, 6-0. The answer of the city council is, we're thinking about defunding the police. I mean, they seem so annoying. Why do we have to have police? Other cities also talking about that, even though, by the way, in wrapping up the first five, I'll point out, even though in these cities you had, in the course of all this violence, and again, there aren't protesters who are protesting anything about George Floyd. These are simply criminal, thug, left-wing, socialist, Marxist elements in this country, funded, motivated, encouraged by Antifa and Black Lives Matter. You had 15 people. 15 people died in the protests and riots following George Floyd's death. I could spend some time going through each of them, but understand, 15 people who had nothing to do with George Floyd's death. Also killed in light of all of these looters and arsonists and murderers who took to the streets of America after the George Floyd situation. So a lot of cities are doing this. In fact, New York City, one last thing in the first five today, New York City is now shifting funding from the police department to youth and social services. People, these kids, these adults, these looters, arsonists, robbers, thieves, and murderers were not on the streets of New York City and all the cities around this country because we lack sufficient social services. That's not the reason they were there. They were there because the American left has been taken over by a radical Marxist element that encourages their conduct, encourages and funds Antifa, encourages and funds Black Lives Matter, and that's where we are today. That's where we are today. We are dealing with those people committing mayhem around our country, and it is not the answer to provide more free stuff and free social services for more kids in New York City or anyplace else. Eric Holder, as you likely recall, Eric Holder, he was the Attorney General under President Obama, looks at all of this massive violence, and instead of saying, wow, let's step up and solve this and bring law and order to our cities, and at the same time bring correction to police departments around the country as needed, he sees it as, this is our moment to make sweeping changes in America. Folks, the sweeping changes the left wants will endanger America, city to city, state to state, around this country. The kind of changes they would bring are a danger to America and to the whole concept of law and order in this country. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. So I want to talk about systemic racism and perspectives. And this term gets used a lot. It's a very, very trendy term, systemic racism. And in particular, people use it to refer to the conduct of the police departments in this country. Systemic racism means more than just pointing at an isolated incident, pointing to, this officer on this day engaged in violence toward this person, and that the officer was white and the citizen was black, and we think it was questionable or maybe obvious police brutality. So that's an incident that we always will investigate. And we do every time in this country. We investigate. Officers get prosecuted as they should. They get investigated, they get charged, they get tried, prosecuted, they get convicted. And that's happened in Minneapolis. The truly unjustifiable action toward George Floyd, which the entire nation saw because someone was videoing the knee of that officer on the neck of George Floyd. America saw that. That officer has been charged with murder. The other officers who stood around did nothing have also been charged. The point is, it's one thing to say, maybe we have a problem with that officer, maybe this incident justifies investigation, and we do that. But the argument of the left is there's systemic racism in police departments around this country. Systemic racism, meaning it's a system, it's a pattern, it's by design, it's a plan, it's intentional, it's carried out across the country. So we have, because people use that term so freely and it's thrown out there, we have kind of the assumption in the American political conversation, well, you know, we're trying to get better, but we still have systemic racism. And so even the idea that any conservative, any individual wants to challenge that, wants to say, are we sure we have systemic racism versus isolated instances? Or maybe we have some police departments have a problem, but many do not. Or even only a tiny portion, a small portion of various police departments have a problem. But the answer of the left is it's systemic. It's spread through the system, every police department, every city, every officer. And it is what gives rise to and gives really motivation to these city councils who are deciding, you know, yeah, our plan is we're just going to defund the police department and move to community justice, which, by the way, will become a talking point and maybe won't even need to be talked about very much. It'll be a huge element in the fall elections. If you think that America, tax-paying Americans and hardworking Americans, law-abiding Americans are going to sit back and watch the mayors of big cities engage in the actual defunding of police departments, and you're going to have people in those states vote for what will obviously be the utter chaos and lawlessness that will ensue. But I want to get to this systemic racism thing, because part of the problem is that you can't even discuss it, you can't even question it. The systemic racism argument is the given. If you are a leftist, it's the given. Everybody has to agree. Nobody can argue about it. No one can question it. So when people come up with data and facts that refute it, this makes the left livid, and so they attack people. There was a very great piece written in the Wall Street Journal by someone who's joined us in the show before, Heather McDonald. She wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal called "The Myth of Systemic Police Racism." It's based on data. It's based on facts. She runs through the facts that make it clear that regardless of the left-wing talking point, never will stop talking blather, the fact is the data do not support, or because data is a plural, data do not support the argument of the left that there's systemic police racism in this country. There is a crime problem in many large, low-income and majority minority communities. There's a crime problem. There is a higher crime rate in many communities, which leads to more police interaction in those communities, trying to stop the crime or prevent the crime or arrest the people committing the crime. But the actual statistics do not back up what the left is saying. And everyone who tries to make this point is ridiculed and mocked. Heather McDonald brings this data out. She had it in previous books that she wrote. She gives speeches about it. She's attacked on college campuses, not because her data is incorrect, not because she's making arguments that the data don't support, but because she's actually daring to put facts out there. She's attacked for saying, actually, the data, the very FBI data we have that shows arrests, the very Department of Justice data, does not support what the left claims is true, systemic police racism. And I want to put a comma there and say, she's proven this. Other researchers have proven this also, that the data does not support the argument that there is systemic police racism. But here's my comma. At the same time is true, I know from dear friends of mine, moms who are black, who've got black sons, and who are in black families in my community, I know. I've had many law-abiding, completely law-abiding, well-behaving, dear friends of ours talk about the fact that they are pulled over more often, especially black men, especially young black men, pulled over more often by police than their white counterparts. Questioned more often by police. Stopped more often by police. I am not saying there is no racism in this country. I am not trying to claim that. I think racism as a mindset that exists, sadly, in many people, and racism that exists in the hearts and the thinking of Black Americans and white Americans and Asian Americans and everybody of every background. There's a certain element of our society that carries racist thought. No law or policy is ever going to change that. I don't like it, it's ugly, but racism is not something a law can erase. We can try to look at behaviors by police officers, behaviors by any people in authority in our country and say, we want to be very, very careful to root out racism. We want to be careful to eliminate racism in our criminal justice system and in what the police are doing. I think that you have to be able, if you want to have an honest conversation about this huge battle we're in right now, we cannot, no one who defends the police, which count me in, I defend the police, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, everyone's life matters. Life matters. Everyone's life matters. I'm a defender of the police. I'm grateful for the police. I would never vote to defund the police, never support such an idiotic idea. But you can't at the same time, in the honest conversation we have to have in this country, say on the one hand, there's not this massive systemic racism in the criminal justice system because the data prove that it doesn't exist, but we still have racism. We can always work to do better. We can always, as a society, work to improve ourselves, to create that more perfect union. We can have a dialogue, a conversation. We can listen to each other. You may recall the senator from North Carolina, the Black Republican senator from North Carolina, Tim Scott, talked about this on the floor of the Senate. This is a man, if you know what he looks like, he's very dignified. He said he always has a suit on. He's got a suit, a tie. He drives a nice car. And he talked 2 or 3 years ago on the floor of the Senate about the idea that it is completely, that in his own experience, his life experience being a senator in Washington, D.C., more frequently followed by police, more frequently pulled over than his colleagues, stopped, pulled over, asked for ID, asked who he is. He talked about that in the floor of the Senate. We cannot deal with this huge challenge we're facing as a country by simply ignoring the reality that many of our fellow Americans who are Black citizens of this country, our fellow Americans, say happens to them. You can't ignore that reality. And at the same time, you can't ignore that reality and say, no, the problem is just, criminal conduct and we're going to crack down. We have to all be open to the idea that, yeah, there's some racism. We always try to do better, but we cannot have a lawless society. We can't have a society in which we have just mayhem and no police in charge, no policing. We can't have that either. Americans who want the America of the dream of the founding, the Martin Luther King idea of America, where he talked about, he wanted his children to live in a country where they're judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That's what we all should be working for. But I want to get around to where we are with the George Floyd protests. And they're not, I really hate that word protest in connection with these looters, arsonists, robbers, thieves, and murderers who rampaged this country for the last week. But where we are is a conversation again about race. There was a great contribution made to that conversation by Candace Owens this week. Candace Owens, you likely know, she's been on the show before. She's just a young Black woman who, I will tell you very quickly if you don't know her story before I play this clip. It's a little lengthy clip. She had a 17-minute video which she did about all the issues arising out of the George Floyd death in Minneapolis. And she has said several times on media, it's had 70 million views, 70 million views. So a lot of people listen to what she has to say. She runs through a bunch of issues. But let me tell you how she got to where she is very quickly, because if you don't know the story, it's important to know. So Candace Owens was not a particularly political person, but she grew up in a low-income area. She grew up in New York, and she talked about in New York how so many of her friends, her neighbors, her family members, she's speaking of her Black, people who live in the Black majority community. She said all of them, for the whole time she was growing up, talked about Donald Trump as the man, or she says he was the gold standard. He was the man. Everybody in the Black community talked about what a great guy he was. We love Donald Trump because he was an icon, obviously, for decades. A billionaire in New York City and did a lot of great things for people in New York City. So she talks about the idea all the time she was growing up, she heard all of this, you know, the man, the gold standard, everyone want to be like Donald Trump when I grow up. The black community overwhelmingly embraced him. The moment he became the Republican candidate, or even declared his candidacy, and then when he won the primary and became the Republican candidate, she noticed as a young adult for the first time in her life that all these people who used to say he was the man, the gold standard, the great guy, are all of a sudden saying, he's a racist. Donald Trump is a racist. And she said it really made her think, what are you talking about? How could you say this? This is the same one. This is the same guy. You used to love him. And all of a sudden, because he's running as a Republican, he's racist. So she started diving into politics, first time in her life, really just launched what is now a fabulous career she has in being a spokesperson for bringing the truth of America and Republican Party values to the black community in America by speaking up about the policies of the Democrat Party that have devastated black America. This is her mission to help more black Americans see it is the policies of the Democrat Party that have destroyed the black community and the black family in America. That's her mission. But she got started just because she observed what I just told you about, Donald Trump being called racist after being lauded for so many years. And she started doing videos, quite literally sitting around her apartment and just talking. And some of them went viral overnight. Videos talking about how the world she lives in, I can't go off on her videos, but they're fabulous. But this one she did 17 minutes long. I have a rather lengthy clip from it, not the whole 17 minutes, but a pretty healthy clip. I want you to hear what she had to say, and then we'll talk about it. This is Candace Owens.
Being a black conservative is not a trend. It is not just being a Trump supporter. It is about doing the hard work and the research and learning the things, the things behind what conservatism, the foundation of what conservatism really is, really. And I came across something in Shelby Steele's book that hit me like a truck, and it has stuck with me and it has transformed me. And I hope that when I repeat this to you, it will transform you, Black Americans, to realize that there is something very ugly and broken about our culture. And the only way we're going to fix it is if we're honest about it. So Shelby Steele was talking in his book, I believe it was White Guilt, and he was talking about something unique about the culture of Black Americans that you will not find in any other culture in America. And it is the fact that we cater to the bottom denominator of our society. We have collectively lowered our average because over the last 5 years, it has become extremely fashionable for us to martyr criminals. It's unbelievable. Not even Latinos do this. They will not martyr their criminals. They do not put the names of their criminals on shirts. They don't buy posters of their criminals. They don't get celebrities to speak out about their criminals and in defense of their criminals. They just say, you are a criminal, goodbye, right? That is just, but Black Americans were unique. And it is incredible because we dismiss people that are at the top of our communities. Bye-bye Condoleezza Rice, you're a coon. Bye-bye Larry Elder, you're a coon. Bye-bye Shelby Steele, Thomas Sowell, coons, Uncle Tom's gone. Bye, hate you. Here we are, George Floyd, you are a martyr and a hero. There is no dispute and no argument that you're going to hear from me that what Derek Chauvin did was right. There is not, and the reason why I'm not talking about Derek Chauvin is because we actually have reached a consensus in this society. Everybody agrees that what he did was wrong. Everybody is happy that he is arrested no matter what color you are. And every single person hopes that justice is served to George Floyd's family. That is not why I'm doing this video. This is not a defense of Derek Chauvin. This is not a video to say that when you are a criminal, you deserve to die. Nope, none of that. I want to talk about martyring criminals. I want to talk about suddenly putting them on t-shirts and picket signs and marching and pretending they were the best representatives that we've had of our communities. That the whole concept of racialized police brutality is a myth, okay? All you have to do is sit down and do basic mathematics to discover that the entire narrative that we have been sold is a lie, okay? It's a lie. There is no racially targeted police brutality against Black Americans. In fact, if you are a white American and you commit a violent crime, you have a 25% higher chance of suffering a police fatality than Black people. Now, you might come across some people that are really bad at math, and they'll say, Candace, I know that only 9 Black people were killed last year unarmed by police officers, and 19 white people were killed unarmed by police officers. But Black Americans are only 13% of the population, and white Americans are 60% of the population. So that's why. No, that's not how math works. You don't look at the numbers according to how many black people there are in America and how many white people there are in America, because not all white people commit crimes and not all black people commit crimes. The numbers you look at is how many police encounters black people had versus how many police encounters white Americans had. And when you look at those numbers, you will realize that the only thing we're doing disproportionately in this country is committing crimes. Take 2018, for example, right? 13% of the population, black Americans, accounted for 40% of all of the murders and something like 50% of all violent offenses in the country. That's not normal. We are having more encounters with police, and despite having more encounters with police, white Americans are the ones that are being killed at a higher rate, okay? That's the truth. The left thinks we're dumb, okay? And we have to stop proving them right. We have to stop taking the bait. We have to stop accepting a foolish election time narrative that is going to disappear on November 3rd. It's going to be like it never happened. The gap between Philando Castile, who, by the way, was a real victim, who I use my platform to speak out about, right? The gap between Philando Castile and George Floyd is exactly 4 years. What do you think, guys? What do you think this is really about? All they care about is power. All they want to do is destroy your neighborhoods, burn them down, shut down your businesses, and get you on government dependence. At the same time, poo-pooing you and telling you they're going to fight the big boogeyman of racism that doesn't exist as a problematic thing in this country, okay?
Candace Owens, I'm telling you, folks, I've had the pleasure of meeting her. She is just a fireball. She's full of energy, and she's just full of kind of, it's an unvarnished. She doesn't try to do a kind of a statesman-like presentation. She just sits down and tells you like it is. But she's talking about the data that I mentioned a moment ago that was written out in the Wall Street Journal and many other places about Heather McDonald, many others. Gather the data. They show there's no such thing as systemic racism with respect to policing in the black community. There's actually a crime problem in the black community, and we got to look at the reasons why that is. But it's not because the police pick on people who are otherwise minding their own business. It's because police are responding. They have interactions with the black community more often because of the rate of crime. Her message in that, I mean, I don't know. She mentioned, I think I said before that we played that clip. She says 70 million times, whatever the number of times is it's been heard. This is the kind of message that should help wake everyone up, of every race, skin color, everyone, to stop and think, are we getting caught up in the narrative of the left? And let me just tell you, yes, what is happening in our country, the very vicious, unjustifiable conduct by the Minneapolis police officer who's now under arrest for murder, as are the other officers who stood around and didn't stop him. That was a bad incident. But what our country is now dealing with is it's like a mesmerism, a hypnotism. Everybody must salute. Systemic racism is real. It is very, very bad. And the only explanation of it is white privilege, white supremacy, whatever other words they want to use to criticize American culture. But we're looking at making radical changes in this country. Back to my first segment today. Radical changes in eliminating the police department, defunding the police department. I mean, people, I can tell you that these politicians are caught up in thinking, wow, I'm going to be seen as a real hero, a social justice warrior. That's me. I'm going to be seen as standing up. The end of the day is they're buying into a intentionally created, not just overreaction, isn't even the right word. The unfortunate death of George Floyd in Minneapolis was simply used by leftists who already wanted to destroy America, who already wanted to create chaos and mayhem. They had their opportunity. They used that incident as a trigger. They launched long existing organizations around this country, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, other extremist organizations. Those organizations, get the word, launch into the violence we saw. And they did it all because it's orchestrated. Let me be clear about something. You could not have all of that coordinated violence around this country overnight over that one incident. You had people in New York City, I can't remember if I play this clip for you, you had protesters who were really just criminal thugs in New York City getting into the heart of Manhattan to commit their mayhem, arson, theft, arriving in limousines. Yeah, this is not an organic response to George Floyd. And this is and his unfortunate death. This is a long plan, next step along the way in the leftist mission to take over this country, to create chaos. And what do you think is going to happen when we actually defund the police departments? We're in more chaos. You're going to have people clamoring for control. You're going to give away your liberty and everything you want to have because get control. Look what's happened to our country. I mean, people we cannot get played by what the left is doing. And back to Candace Owens, her willingness to speak up and talk about actual data. She had much more data than the little portion I played and what you heard. Much more data. This systemic racism argument of the left is a lie. It's just a lie. It's not, and I say the left because it's not just Black Lives Matter. Liberal intellectuals so proud of their moral superiority over everybody else and their willingness to understand the plight of the downtrodden use that term, and it causes many, many people to fall into the, oh my gosh, I guess I ought to feel guilty because I happened to have a certain color skin. I could play more clips for you of other instances. It wasn't just that one instance I played, whatever it was, last Wednesday or Thursday, that was a group, I think it was in Baltimore, where you had a group of about 300 white protesters, but they were standing there to support Black Lives Matter, and the Black Lives Matter leader up there leading it has with his megaphone telling them what to say, and the audience gets down on their knees. The entire audience, 300 people on their knees, repeating after whatever the Black Lives Matter guy was telling him to say. I'm so sorry I was born. I apologize for my white privilege. I apologize for white supremacy. I promise to do everything I can to fix my, I mean, on and on and on and on and on. Folks, we are being worked into a frenzy, and the answer is not to get drawn in and take sides, is to reject the chaos they're trying to create. And the left understands, and I'm going to tell you something really, really important about all of this. I think the American left, and I'm talking about the leaders, the Democrat Party, the cabal that runs that party, the radical left of this country, the Marxists, the socialists, the communists, the Democrats, are all in one big fat cabal together right now. They are worried because Donald Trump, despite their incessant attacks on him for 3+ years, Donald Trump produced results that all of America could see. Donald Trump, prior to the latest onslaught against him, the grotesque overreaction to the coronavirus and COVID-19, which we'll talk about tomorrow on this show with Dr. Robin Armstrong, but the left saw that Donald Trump had actually proved to more and more people in this country that the ideas of America are right. The ideas of the foundational ideas of rights from God simply because you were born, that all men are equal, that we have rights from God because we were born, that the government exists to protect those rights, that the free markets and freedom and entrepreneurship, these are the only answers that allow Americans to use those gifts. Those ideas allow Americans to flourish. We had a booming economy despite the left's relentless attacks on President Trump up until the time of the coronavirus. We had a booming economy, lowest unemployment numbers in a long time, and we had more and more Americans waking up to the fact that freedom, free markets, capitalism, and the very idea of America works. The idea works that is America. And this is what the left cannot tolerate. The American people figuring out that what the left tries to sell you, socialism, Marxism, communism, leftism, whatever you want to call it, what the left is selling you is garbage. And this is what Donald Trump helped more people recognize. So, back to George Floyd, and as Candace Owens said, as everyone in the country, there's no one in this country defending the officers involved in that hideous conduct. But back to that death. It was unfortunate, it was wrong, and I'm glad those officers have to be prosecuted, and they are going to be. But the reaction, the left orchestrates this kind of reaction to get America back onto the camps they're trying to create, back into the camps of leftists and Black Lives Matter and Antifa against the idea of America. This is what the left is doing. I think the left in this country is actually very, very frightened because Donald Trump overcame their efforts to attack him during the campaign and come up with all the Russia-Trump collusion whispering. Donald Trump overcame the effort the left made to try to bring about the Russia-Trump collusion to claim that he colluded with the Russians. And after 3 years and thousands of depositions and millions of dollars and hundreds of agents involved, The answer, after all of the digging they could do under every rock there was the finding of the Mueller report. No collusion, no obstruction. This guy did nothing wrong. There was no collusion. So Donald Trump overcame that. He overcame the next effort they made, the Ukraine impeachment, complete garbage hoax story. The Democrats actually had the audacity to look the American people in the camera, in the face, and talk about accusing Trump of an impeachable offense in a conversation he had with the president of the Ukraine, claiming that he said exactly and did exactly what Joe Biden actually really said and did. And even though the Democrat-controlled House voted to impeach, he was not removed because, and it wasn't just because Republicans had the majority in the Senate, it's because most Americans could figure out the left, the Democrats are railroading this president. So back to where we are now. We have Donald Trump winning out after the attempt to falsely accuse him of collusion, winning out against the impeachment thing, and we're now turning ourselves around out of this overreaction to the coronavirus and the shutdown of our economy, which only plays to the benefit of the left. And the Democrats are looking at the fall elections. We're in June. The elections are in November, and they're seeing Trump is already reemerging from the coronavirus. They have to have something. The left that wants this Marxist, socialist, communist takeover of America, which is what the Democrat Party is. Do not delude yourself. There are really a lot of nice, moderate Republicans and only a few extremists. They have extremists who speak up, but the Democrat Party has been taken over by Marxist ideas. What their platform stands for are Marxist ideas. So you have the Democrats now in a total panic, recognizing fall elections are coming. Trump has not only shown America and the world that freedom and free markets work, he's actually showed that to black Americans. And this is what the left is really worried about. It's why they're trying very hard to drive a racial wedge into our country, trying very hard to convince Americans, to convince our citizens of this country, black citizens, that regardless of all the good that happened to you in the last 3 years and everything turning around and going well, don't forget, really, the Republicans are your enemy. Donald Trump is out to get you. It's a racist country. The left can only survive and gain political power by having black America embrace what the left is trying to say. The left is trying to convince them America's a racist country, and the only way to stay safe from that racism is for you, black American voters, to vote for the Democrat Party to protect you from the evil Republicans. And I actually think even that is not working. I think actually more and more Americans are recognizing that, again, the left is stirring things up. This is not me. I am not saying the police are perfect. I'm not saying there is no racism in America. I'm not saying we have a perfect country and have nothing to talk about. I'm saying the systemic racism argument of the left is not borne out by the facts. I'm saying that there's been no country that on the planet Earth has been perfect. America strives to be better and better. Yes, we have police officers who need sometimes to be prosecuted. They sometimes need to be retrained. They may need to be fired. We can work on all of our problems. But the left is telling you, throw out the baby with the bathwater. Throw out the whole idea of America because of the George Floyd incident. That's what the left is telling you, and that's what America has to say. No, we're going to hang in there with the idea of America, the goodness of America, and we're not going to be played and duped by the left. One last thing. It's really interesting that Candace Owens, I have one more clip from Matt the Wonderful to show you that we had Candace Owens made some reference to how, you know, the left was trying to, that once they speak, everyone better just salute to them. All this kneeling in front of I mentioned the situation in Baltimore, other incidents. I didn't even play the one about the military officers, military men in our military on their knees at the demand of the Black Lives Matter people. But I want to show you the most bootlicking, artificial, absurd thing that Nancy Pelosi led on the floor of the House. This is the floor of the United States Congress. Pelosi and her gang. Let me show you. Okay, these goofballs. Okay, actually stop the camera right there, if you would, for 1 second. Can you freeze it? Okay, this is the House floor. And this is, okay, maybe they're not on the House floor. There's someplace in Washington, I thought it was a House floor. But the point is, Nancy Pelosi led this little charade, this little, freak show of having these members of Congress, and Schumer is there too, the senator, on their knee. They all took a knee for 9 minutes, the amount of time that the officer in Minneapolis had his knee on George Floyd's neck. So they did a 9-minute silent protest. I want to point out 3 things about it. One is, this is utter and pure theatrical pandering. Utter, pure theatrical pandering. Absurdity. Number 2, all of them have on, as you can see, those brightly colored with the scarves, and those are symbolic of trying to send a message of an affinity, a connection to African Americans. It's a pattern in those scarves that's supposed to symbolize Africa. So they've got this African American scarves on. Number 3, the person, I couldn't get the clip, but you see where Nancy Pelosi's in the red in the front. So just slightly to the left in the back of her, there's a woman, I don't know who that is. What's so dang funny is you watch the whole thing, she's texting on her cell phone. She's playing with her cell phone this alleged 9 minutes. You can see her in it. And last one is just kind of funny. But I guess Jerry Nadler wasn't about to do the knee thing. He's going to stand up and do it. But I'm showing you this to say this is utter, pure, 100% pandering. Pandering to Black Americans. Look, we'll get on our knees. We'll prove to you. This does nothing to solve anything except, they're all into imagery and trying to show America how much they care. People, we're going to be talking about this a lot, and I may someday really come in with a bunch of charts and numbers to tell you, but please read the articles linked on our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop down, list of links. You can read the Heather McDonald piece in Wall Street Journal. You can read her books. You can read other sources. The argument that there is systemic racism in the administration of the criminal justice system in America is hogwash, and we better start calling that. Larry Elder, by the way, had a great clip. I did not have time to do everything I wanted to do in this, but Larry Elder had a great clip. Same thing in an interview. He was talking about that he uses a synonym for hogwash, I won't say on air, but he's saying complete garbage when and this is just like last couple days. Ran out of time to play his clip because I thought Candace was more powerful. Okay, 2 last quick stories to get to. I see we're a little bit getting close to running out of time. One is about Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They're Marxist, not American. And when we had Dr. Everett Piper in the show last week, he made reference to this. But the Black Lives Matter website, I urge you to go there yourself, blacklivesmatter.com. Go there yourself, and you can click down on the homepage under what we believe. Read for yourself what they believe. I'm going to say, yes, of course, every American's life matters. The lives of innocent people matter. The lives of every American matter. The lives of Black Americans, white Americans, police officers, every skin color, ethnicity, race, national origin, everyone's life matters. And so, therefore, Black lives, of course, matter. But the organization Black Lives Matter and their website, blacklivesmatter.com, lists what they believe in. And people, if you want the Marxist agenda, the destruction of America, the destruction of the whole concept of America, you can read it right here on what Black Lives Matter stands for. I'm going to run out of time to tell you, but read it yourself. These people are not about simply trying to bring equality, trying to hold on to the America of the founding, but help lifting up Black Americans. It's a Marxist leftist agenda. It is a Marxist leftist agenda, destruction of the family. They call it destruction of the patriarchal society. They have a lot about, it takes a village, helping women be freed of the burden of having to raise their own children. They also have lots of talk about, regardless of, they are there to protect Black Americans, regardless of actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs, immigration status. They have the whole entire no such thing as an American, everything leftist you could ever want them to believe in, and you'd want anyone to believe in. They want to dismantle cisgender privilege. They want to uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women. They go on and on. I'm just telling you, this is not a pure organization that sits there all day long trying to think about how can we help Americans come to a unified sense of inclusion of all people and be sure we bring justice. This is a radical leftist Marxist organization. Same thing with Antifa. I've always said Antifa, and last Monday, so a week ago today, we had Star Parker in the show, and I noticed she was saying Antifa, whichever way you say it. Point is, it is a typical leftist projection concept where they are calling themselves anti-fascist, made a name of the organization to mean anti-fascist, and they are the fascists. I mean, it is the most Orwellian doublespeak, the conduct they've engaged in around this country, attacking people who show up at Trump rallies, just waving their flags, and for whatever reason they support Donald Trump, attacking those people. They lie to the media regularly. They engage in violence. They are fascist in their conduct, and yet their conduct is supposed to be the one you're supposed to think is representing them. Antifa, the most far-left radical organization, very dangerous. Last story in about 1 minute, I'll tell you this, and I'm going to come back to this theme many, many times over the next several months. But this idea, if we must be tribal, understanding that what the American left is doing with Black Lives Matter and with all of the entities that they break America up, the left lives for identity politics, lives to divide America into little silos. So you live in the African-American silo, and you live in the Hispanic-American silo, and you live in this silo, all these groups. And the whole point is, once they've got you identified, so you think that's who I am, I'm not an American, I'm an African-American, I'm an Asian American, I'm a this American, that American, you forget the idea of America, and you think your goal is to win out more for your group than some other group. It intentionally and inevitably pits Americans against each other. It's the entire purpose of identity politics. It's not to support people, it is to divide America. So I wanted to say this, and I'm gonna have to wrap it up on this, and I'll come back to it another day. If we have to have tribes, we need to be the tribe of the founding ideas of America. That's our tribe, the founding ideas of America tribe. The people who believe in, regardless of skin color, age, gender, ethnicity, national origin, anything else. The tribe that should be America is the tribe that believes in the founding ideas of America, and everyone's welcome in that tribe. No one's left out. I could not join the African American tribe. I could not join the Asian American tribe, but every single person in this country can join the tribe of the American ideas. I mean, people committed to the ideas of the founding of this country. The ideas in the Declaration that says we were all created equal, the rights from God simply because we were born, that we have the right to live in freedom, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is your God-given right by the very fact that you were born, and that the government exists to protect that the constitutional structure is all designed to protect you, to protect everyone. The Constitution gives all sorts of brilliant ideas, the founding ideas of our country, brilliant ideas that can in perpetuity protect everyone. That's got to be the American tribe, the only tribe any of us should actually want to belong to. And my friends, we're actually at the end of the show, we're running out of time, but I want to take just a moment to do at the end of every show, which is to tell you why the ideas and the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started our show today on defunding police will solve the criminal rampages. Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA now looks like a war zone. Protests of police brutality are justified and transformative when peaceful. Looting, bombing, and burning hurt innocent people. They are not protests. Given the obvious differences between peaceful protests and destructive rioting, only anti-American lunatics can argue for dismantling law enforcement. Civilization itself depends on the rule of law. It is the foundation of civil order. Calling it community-based justice instead of police will not change the function. It must be performed. If it's not performed, chaos is the only possible result. Hysteria will never promote progress. Basic building blocks of civilization will never change. The left has no vision of anything better. Its mission is simply to destroy America. On systemic racism perspectives, why it matters, listen to Larry Elder. I'll put a link up to him because he's great too. Listen to Larry Elder, Candace Owens, and Heather McDonald. Do not buy the systemic racism narrative. Shouting does not equal evidence. Painstaking data analysis has shown the opposite of systemic racism in America. Candace Owens' video has had 70+ million views. The mainstream media combined doesn't have that. That suggests there's a huge segment of America that is not on board with the systemic racism hysteria and the relentlessly deceptive mainstream media narrative about race and police. The mainstream media's silence as to black former police Captain David Dorn. I didn't get to talking about him today, but that's who they should be mourning instead of George Floyd, the guy who was killed by looters trying to defend his friend's store. The mainstream media's silence as to black former police Captain David Dorn, murdered by rioters, is the tell that this is not about concern for blacks and black communities. It is about leftist agitation toward anarchy and the overthrow of America under the Constitution. On Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Marxist, not American, Black Lives Matter does not hide its agenda. Read their website. Supporting the queering of society, favoring dismantling the patriarchy, meaning the nuclear family structure. The village should raise the child. Supports abortion, which is the #1 killer of black Americans. Black lives do matter, but Black Lives Matter is a straight-out anti-American Marxism. Antifa is quintessential left-wing projection, claiming to be anti-fascism while ordering everyone as to what they can and cannot say, think, or do, which is fascism. Americans must not be confused or misled. There's nothing positive or constructive for blacks or whites or browns or anyone else about the activities of Black Lives Matter or Antifa. And finally, if we must be tribal, Americans must reject the tribalism of identity politics. We must not allow ourselves to be defined by physical characteristics none of us chose. If Americans are to be tribal around American ideals. Unalienable rights from God at birth, rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as individuals. All men and women created equal and deserving of dignity and respect. Rights belong to the individual, not to any group as a group. Content of character matters to responsibility, merit, and progress. Skin color and other physical characteristics do not. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.